We're starting the fourth in a series of tapes called I Remember World War II, Plainville Remembers World War II, and we have some very interesting guests with us today. We'll be right with them. Our first guest this afternoon is Edna Weitzke, Army nurse, longtime Plainville resident, and now living in Farmington. And Edna, you brought a beautiful portrait of yourself in your uniform. Tell us about this.
Yes, this is a uniform that we wore, and the insignia is the caduceus, indicating the medical insignia. And I was a second lieutenant at this time, so eventually became a first lieutenant.
And the hairstyle is very indicative of what they wore during the war.
Yes, that was pompadour style.
And how did you hold those little hats on? Your cap?
Oh, with a almost like a bobby pin.
Uh-huh. I always wondered how the nurses kept those on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, Edna, why don't you tell us a little about your experiences?
Well, I entered the Army Nurse Corps in 1941, and really signed up for a year. But after Pearl Harbor, they just forgot to let me out. So I was sent to New Orleans, Louisiana, and a hospital called the Guard General Hospital on Lake Pontchartrain. And it was a new hospital, so we had to order supplies and so forth. And then we learned a little bit about military protocol, which we found out was much different than civilian life. And because we didn't have any patients at first, we were able to enjoy New Orleans, which is an old world city, and with its grill work and a lot of history there. So after we'd been there about 6 months, I joined the 64th General Hospital, which was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And it was the LSU unit. So a lot of the people from New Orleans were in it, most from LSU and from New Orleans Hospital. So we were now trained there for duty to go overseas. We worked at the station hospital at the same time, and were issued uniforms and given shots and everything to go overseas. And then when it was time, we went up to Camp Shanks in New York and boarded the Thomas H. Barry, which was, and I remember that they were playing For Me and My Gal. So we were on a convoy, and so we zigzagged over, and took us 2 weeks. We didn't know where we were going, but they kept saying we were heading for the Rock. And so when we went through the Straits, we went to Bizerte. And as we landed and going, I remember going down the gangplank with a Mazette bag on one side, one shoulder, gas mask on the other, and my steel helmet. And they told me that Pathé News had filmed it, and that it was being shown in the Plainville Strand Theater, and that Bobby Morgan said, "Oh, there's Edna Anderson." So I was really kind of pleased to know that.
Hometown heroine.
Yes. So then we went out to, we thought because we were a general hospital, that we were going to be in a building, but we ended up in a tented area which had been taken over by it had been previously by the 8th of AC. So it was we had a hospital, a tented area in most of them, and then there were Quonset huts for the seriously ill. And at first we had to eat outside and kind of beat the flies to eating. So we all came down with Montezuma's Revenge. And the casualties arrived from Sicily, and we had to work long hours to care for them. I was on an orthopedic ward, and it was very busy because most all gunshot wounds were orthopedic. And they finally erected a tent for our mess hall, but we still got sea rations, and I still don't like Spam and powdered milk. The Arabs went by periodically on their donkeys, and they used to have the women trail in the back. But then they found out that there were mines in the fields, so they sent the women first. And we were also horrified to find out that they thought we were camp followers.
Oh, dear.
Our social life was booming because we were a small group of American women in this area, and so we had the Air Corps who were flying P-40s at that time came, some of the Navy men, and of course, the British found us. They came with their wool jackets and shorts and their high socks and berets. And our doctor said, "You're not going out with those fellows, are you?" And we said, "Of course we are." And then we spent Christmas in North Africa. And it was rather cold because we were, in the mountains. And so we wore, I'll show you, these are long johns under our fatigues.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in front of my tent, standing there looking kind of sad-sacky.
Just hold it for a minute. She's zooming in on it. Now, how many girls would have lived in a tent like that?
There were 6 of us
6
in the tent, yes. And we had a old potbelly stove in the middle with a long pipe, which was usually pretty red hot. And we slept on our Valpacks, not Valpacks. Anyway, bedrolls.
Oh.
And we put our clothes in there, and that's how we pressed our clothes. We put the uniform in there, and we slept on it. And then, so most of the boys saw us just in our fatigues during the winter. Well, in the spring, we blossomed out in these seersucker wraparounds. And these fellows were pretty happy to see legs again. And so they whistled at us. And I admonished them for whistling, and they said, "You should worry when we stop whistling." Mount Vesuvius erupted while we were there, too. And some of the GIs got pictures of it. The Tulane unit were near us. They were the 45th General. And so our doctors used to get together with them and play football. So Army trucks would take us over there, and we cheered for our team. They weren't very good football players, but we had a lot of fun. And we had a piano in what we called our rec tent. And since I played by ear, we would play little songs. And the shower truck came around periodically, too, and we'd trudge up there and take our showers. And
now, how was that set up?
well, it was, they came around and they set it up with, I don't know whether they must have been a mobile unit, because it was like a community shower.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, when I saw MASH, I thought, I wonder if those guys peeked at us. Nothing like worrying about it 50
Right.
years later. Shortly after that, we received orders to go to Naples, and because we were getting casualties from Anzio Beachhead. And if you remember, there was Monte Cassino at the time, and they didn't want to bomb the Germans because they didn't want to bomb the cathedral, or the abbey. So we were brought to a little town called, wait a minute. So we packed up our gear and went on the Aquitania. And that was a newly renovated hospital ship. So we had fresh fruit and wonderful food, and it was so good to be away from sea rations for a while. But then when we landed in Naples, we were taken by train out to a little town called Maddaloni. And there were these little children there, found out what day we had PX Day, and they would follow us and say, "Chocolat, cigarette for Papa." And
I'll bet they got plenty of handouts, too.
yes, they did, with those little brown eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so then, after that, we were transferred to Leghorn, where Mark Clark's Fifth Army was advancing. And in fact, Mark Clark was a patient in our hospital, and many people got pictures of him. Mark Clark looked at his picture taken, as most generals do.
Now, this is still in Italy?
This is in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Mm-hmm. This is when we moved up to, we were in Italy in Naples, and then we moved up to Leghorn. And we're in a building there that we're right near Pisa. So we, of course, climbed the Leaning Tower, And then we got to go to Rome for 5 days, where we had an audience with Pope Pius, who was then Pope, and we really enjoyed seeing Rome with so much history there. And in the spring of 45, the Germans' forces in northern Italy collapsed, and Mussolini and his mistress were shot by the Italians and hung up in a square in Milan. In April of 1945, we heard of President Roosevelt's death by radio, and we all said, "Who's Truman?" I don't think anyone paid that much attention to vice presidents in those days. Now, we knew we would be sent home if we had enough points, and since I had been in 4 years, I knew I'd be able to go home soon. So I was sent down to Naples with others, and we eventually got on the Volcano, which took us back to New York. And I'll never forget going into New York Harbor and seeing the Statue of Liberty. And I thought, and the tug that brought us in was playing Sentimental Journey. When I ever hear that, I'm back there. You know. And I thought, thank God we're home. Well, then we went to Fort Dix, and everyone was asked if they wanted to stay in or be discharged. And I got in the line to be discharged. Now, Myra Zink from Plainville was also there. So Myra and I went back to Plainville together, and Mr. Zink came and met us at the train station. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I'm home. And I now belong to the Army Nurses Retirement Association, and there's also a memorial being built at the entrance to Arlington Cemetery, and it was signed in by President Reagan. And I sent my resume down there, and it's going to be taped so that people can, go there and look to see. It was all Army nurses. All nurses.
That's marvelous.
Even from World War I.
That's wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, looking back over 50 years back to your military service, what stands out in your mind the most when you think of it?
Well, the thing that stands out in my mind is that Christmas that we were in North Africa. And Christmas Eve, I had to work night duty. And I was coming off duty, and I thought, it's Christmas Day, I'm away from family and friends. Why did I volunteer for this? And as I passed the tent, one of the lads that had lost a leg called out, "Merry Christmas, Miss Anderson." And I was so filled with tears that I could hardly answer. So then I went along, and some of the nurses were caroling, and "Joy to the World, the Lord has come." And I got into my tent, and there was one of my tent mates' father had sent her a little Christmas tree, which he had just finished decorating. And I thought it was the most beautiful little tree I'd ever seen. And I thought, I think I should be here helping those that are trying to work towards peace. And when the lights go on again all over the world.
Right. So you were glad you went in the end.
Yes.
Yes. That's wonderful. Thank you so very much for sharing with us today.
You're welcome.
Our next guest on our tape of Veterans of World War II is Russell Limeburner. Russell was a member of the Army Air Corps, and I have to be very sure to say Corps. Russell had some very interesting experiences this side of the Mississippi, right, Russell?
Yep. I remember when I reported the Devons, they were leaning out the windows. You'll be sorry.
Oh.
All right, they were. There's only two sizes in the Army. Too big or too small. Find somebody that you got too stuff for, swap it around. But within the first 3 months or so, you have everything tailor-made. They got us into I was 4 o'clock in the morning. They woke us up. We had to sit in the barracks, empty barracks, without anything to eat, no breakfast, no lunch, no dinner. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we shipped out for Miami Beach. The first night, we hit Troy, New York, and we came down. We woke up in the morning in Philadelphia. And the guy I was sleeping almost caught cold because I had the blankets.
Now, was this on a train, Russell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the next night, I slept in the upper. We were going through Georgia, and I thought we were going to sweat to death. We had finally hit Miami Beach, and Miami. And they trucked us over to Miami Beach and put us up in hotels. Yeah, the Ocean Spray, 44th and Collins Street in Miami Beach. And I got maybe 6 or 7 days of basic because I was on the boxing team. And we had the day off before, the day of the fight, and the day after the fight off.
No training those days.
No.
Yeah.
And I got caught at a crab game on the roof of the hotel. And what a sunburn. We shipped out the next day to Mississippi. I had to sleep in my stomach. And Mississippi, that was a hellhole. It was a town, maybe a little bigger than Plainville, but there were the CBs at one end of town, the Air Corps at the other end of town. There was about one girl for every 50 fellas. And that was no good. And they did not like us down there either, because we used to get paid, on payday we used to go to the bar, put a $20 bill down, and make sure we take a swig out of the bottle before we set it. Cash this. We haven't got that kind of change. Oh, the beer's on the house. How fast they came up with the change. Oh. That was a town where you walk down the sidewalks, and a black person had to get and walk at the gutter until you got by. And the sidewalks were wide enough for 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's when I went to school, AM school. We were supposed to, after we finished school, we were supposed to report for KP until we shipped out. But 2 other guys and myself, a big pile of wooden and cardboard boxes, we built a shelter in there, and that's where we stayed at nights. In the mornings, we walked down, and we'd find a barracks that was empty. But, I mean, I was sleeping there, but they were in school. And we'd find a guy our size, and we'd change uniforms with him. We'd get the clean ones, and we'd leave the dirty ones. Well, that was it. That's the way we worked. And we finally shipped out. We bumped 3 ladies out of the Pullmans. The Army told them they had to wait for the next train. They were mad, but...
These were civilians.
They were women.
Yeah, civilians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we shipped up to Milwaukee. The officer told us, don't let the MPs catch you with a woman in your bunk. But, remember, they cannot check the women's bunk. The Army always told you what not to do and how to get around it.
Uh-huh.
They were good that way. I hit Milwaukee, that was a staging area. We had B-25s parked there. And you were supposed to get half the camp, got passes one night, the other half the next night. But I got passes every night. I met a captain. When I was 14, I was in the Civilians Military Training Corps. I went 1 year. And I mentioned that to him. He was in the same thing. So I used to make sure I get a pass every night. Milwaukee, there was one thing that stood out in my mind. Was the time I dated 3 girls for the same place at the same time.
That sounds like big trouble.
So I went down, I saw one on one side. I said, look, I got to go back to camp because I sneaked through the hole of the fence. We had a hole in the fence there. That's the guys couldn't get a pass. That's how they went. I told that to 2 of them, and the 3rd one I dated. But
You said B-29s were coming into Milwaukee.
No,
Now,
25s.
B-25s are bombers? Those are bombers?
Billy Mitchell bombers, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was walking guard duty with there one night, And I pumped the shotgun. Boom. No, click. I pumped it again. Boom. That buckshot was roaring off the planes. The corporal of the guard came running. The sergeant, the officer of the day came running. I was just ejecting a shotgun shell. I said, I never did these loaded. I met a girl in Milwaukee. The reason I state this because when I was stationed in Detroit, I used to go back to Milwaukee on weekends to see her. When I was stationed in South Bend, I used to go back to Milwaukee on weekends to see her, but we finally broke up. But Milwaukee was this, hey, all you had to do was, during the day was press your uniforms, shine your shoes. There's nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
There was no training, no nothing. So they shipped us off to Detroit, Wayne County Airport. Wayne County Country Club, they call it. There, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you was trying to sleep, somebody would go into town, somebody was coming in from town, somebody's going to work, somebody's coming home from work. The light was always on over your head. I got tired after a while, so I beat this corporal up underneath me, and I slept on the lower bunk. And we went to town one night, and it was one of these deals where the bartender refused to serve one of the GIs. No liquor. He broke a bottle. He broke a bottle. He was going to shove it in his face. Everything in that bar went out the window. That was movable. Chairs, stools, benches, right to the front window. Window and all. The MPs came later on, and they asked him, which way did they go? The guy said, that way. The MPs went that way.
Now, during the day, there was a lot of nightlife, obviously. During the day, you were working on planes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no. I didn't start to really work on planes. Well, I did in Detroit, yeah. We were more or less still learning.
Mm-hmm. So what would that mean? You were going to classes during the day?
No, you were doing your actual work. But the ones who really did the technical work was the tech sergeants.
Mm-hmm.
Two rockers on 3 stripes. All your gunners got to be that way. I was supposed to be a gunner, but I flagged down my eyesight. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, I was supposed to sit in this top turret on a B-17, but supposed to be. It was in South Bend. Oh, I was in Detroit. My outfit was supposed to ship over to India. And we had our bags all packed at the plane. We were ready to take off. And the Jeep came roaring down, and Johnson, Limeburner, Cottrell, pull your bags out. You're not going to go. So we shipped off to South Bend. That was the 570th Army Air Force Base, Marine Division Air Transport Command, U.S. Army Air Corps. That's what our full address was.
Mm-hmm.
And South Bend is where you really worked. I had a job of changing the prop on a 109 86. The tech order room where they had the tech orders was about 30 volumes. Every time I had to change something in there, read it on the tech orders, go back out and do it, and back and look for another tech order.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you finished all of them, the first part had changed. Well, that was...
But it was really doing it by the book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know one time I was hypnotized by the props on the B-24, the yellow tips.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself walking right towards it. And all of a sudden I snapped out of it.
Good thing.
And there we used to taxi planes around. We did everything but fly them.
Is this where the man was you were telling me about could tell about the planes by the sound of them?
Jimmy Bird. He was out of New Hampshire or Vermont. He was way up north there, yeah. We used to go around the country club and play golf on Saturday. So my funny thing, I always had Saturday off in the Army, and I always had Saturdays off in my job. It's fitted life.
But tell us about your friend that could hear the planes.
Oh yeah, he could be right in the hangar, and he'd hear this plane coming in. And he said, that plane's got magneto trouble. I said, okay, how do you fix it? I don't know. So I had to go down there we used the pliers, a hammer, and baling wire.
And that's how you fix the planes?
A magneto, if you couldn't get it off, you hit it with a hammer and break it. That's why you had to replace it.
Oh, I see. That was easier than fixing it.
I had one guy come in, pilot came in one time. He was in a hurry to get to Detroit. And I checked his oil. He was low. He said, "Have you got enough to make me Detroit?" I said, "Yeah." But I said, "You're not going." "You mean to tell me you are an enlisted man and going to tell me what to do?" I said, "Let me see your flight form." I drew a red line through it. A little box there. Even the president himself couldn't lift that red line.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did you do that? Because he was
So
low on oil?
So he couldn't take off.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, there was something else wrong with his plane?
No, he needed oil, but I mean, if he had been like the other pilots were, we used to call him by their first name.
Mm-hmm.
I might have cleared him, but he got rough, had to have the authority, so he just redlined him. Well,
Now, you told me previously that you were in the Air Corps for something over a year,
1 year, 7 months, 21 days, and 3 hours.
and your stay was cut short because of a problem with old injuries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they sent me up to Bearfield, Fort Wayne, Bearfield Hospital. And that's where I saw my service record.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that I was close to a nervous breakdown. That's why they sent me out.
Mm-hmm.
And they shipped me from Bearfield up to Percy Jones General Convalescent Hospital in Battle Creek, Michigan. That's where I got discharged from.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best day of my life.
When you got out, it was pretty nice to get home.
I didn't get home right away. I went back to South Bend because I was going to stay with a girl that we were supposed to get married.
I see.
But
you didn't.
I met her. She was engaged to some guy. She wrote him a Dear John letter. And we were going steady. I met her family, and her mother and father. She had a license. I didn't. But he would let me drive the car, not her. We used to go through Amish country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Now, you could get gasoline in those days to drive around?
well, at South Bend, only the mechanics could touch the gas tanks. The trucks where you get gas right. If we met a girl and she treated us right, we loaded her up with gasoline.
Russell, looking back over your military stay with those big planes and so forth, what stands out in your mind when you think about it now?
Well, the time I had to change the batteries on a B-24, I worked on B-24s, B-17s, 25s, 39s, P-39s with a white circle with a red star going to Russia.
Oh.
They loved those planes with
Mm-hmm.
the can on the nose, but we had they didn't have a critical enough ceiling for us.
But most of these planes now, anything that says B means bomber. Is that right?
P means pursuit,
Mhm.
fighter plane.
Okay.
And the 63, the Black Widow, we had them all
Mm-hmm.
at one time or other.
Grand old fighting machines.
And the C-46s, the C-47s,
Now, what does the C designate?
cargo.
Cargo. Okay.
The 47s, there's still some flying.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever go up to Bradley Field to the Air Museum and look at these old
I've
planes?
been there.
Yeah. But you started to tell us about one day you had to change something on a particular plane that stood out in your mind.
Change the prop on it. 86. That was my plane. I used to fly. I didn't fly in it, but it was a training plane.
Mm-hmm.
And my pilot, I had a pilot there. He was just co-pilot status. He had no toes. He was lost in a crash up in Alaska. He used to fly, and I used to fly with him. I remember one night we were flying along. Two guys in a rowboat, fishing. They dove overboard.
Now, Russell, that wasn't nice.
I wasn't flying. He took a Texan up with him one time. And then I got off the plane, he was strictly ghost white.
Mm-hmm.
So what he tries to do, when he comes in, he tries to roll his wheels all on the side of the control tower.
Russell, do you ever hear from any of the people that you were in the service with? Did you keep track of any of the people?
No, only the ones in Plainville were in there with me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there were some other Plainville boys with you?
Oh, yeah.
Can you name some of those for us?
Joe Severio,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Martinelli,
Mm-hmm.
Don Peters, Leo D'Antonio.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Leo just passed away a couple of years ago.
And there's a couple of kids from Farmington.
So you went in together and you kept, of course, you've seen some of these people now.
Yeah, these guys in Plainville, I saw them. All except Johnny.
Yeah.
He will not come down here. His sister told me.
Yeah, yeah. No, we tried to get him to come, but it's too hard for him to talk about it, he said. Yeah. Well, thank you, Russell. That was very interesting. Gives us an insight into the Army Air Corps, right? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next guest on our tapes is Bill Weitzke, longtime Plainville teacher. Everybody knows Bill Weitzke. And Bill, you brought a couple of handsome pictures there with you today. Want to tell us about those to start with?
Well, actually, these represent a little progress in time. When I first entered, the picture that I'm holding here on my right is when I was an enlisted man. And then eventually, as time progressed, I applied for OCS and received a commission in a transportation corps. And so this represents several years in between, but also reminds me of many experiences I had in both capacities.
And you're going to tell us some of those experiences right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, first I'd like to mention when I first was drafted. I was waiting to be drafted, and most of my friends had been inducted, and I had received word and whatnot, so finally I notified the draft board and asked them why I hadn't been notified. They said, "Oh, are you interested in going?" And I said, "Well, yes." I said, "All my friends are going." Well, I was notified in a very short period of time. And I was inducted in Unionville, where most of the Plainvilleites were asked to go. But Mr. Trask, who was superintendent of schools, said, "Hey, Bill," he said, "I can get you a deferment." Because at that time I was teaching at Plainville High School, and it may be interesting to note that I took Ivan Wood's job at Plainville High when he went into the service. But I told Herb Trask that no way was I interested in getting a deferment, that I'd like to do my part if I possibly could. So I went to Devon's and had my basic training, and at that time they evaluated my background, thought I could make a great contribution by helping rehabilitate wounded and also give lectures on current events with the background I had. Well, they told that story to many others, and once I got in and had my basic training, I ended up in the hospital end where I was a ward boy.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sakes.
so as time went on, I was accepted for an AST program at the University of New Hampshire, field of psychology, but well, when I got up there, that close, and I was sent back to Devon's. And then as time progressed, I was sent to New York City, to the Brooklyn Army base, and was at that time assigned to a medical detachment. And we were waiting for orders, and eventually I was assigned to a C-3 transport ship. It was a cargo ship and also transported troops. And our first trip was across the Atlantic to Britain, and we were in a convoy, and that was an interesting experience because you would wake up in the morning to find out what position in the convoy your ship was in. They used to have what they called a coffin corner. If you were at one of the corners, that's where the submarines would pick you off. So it was always to your advantage to be in the cluster of ships. Well, I was on the the Sea Porpoise for a couple of trips, and then we were in Britain preparing for the invasion. And we
This is the Normandy invasion.
yes, yes, and I kept a journal, or you want to call it a diary or a journal, and I'd like to just share a couple of entries I had at this particular time.
Please do.
And, for instance, July 3rd, 1944, says, we arrived at our destination this evening. From unreliable sources, we are supposedly near the city of Cherbourg, France. At any rate, we are anchored off the coast of northern France and directly behind the Allied beachhead. En route, we passed a number of convoys going back to England. I can easily realize now how large an undertaking this new front is and the organization it required. About the only indication that we are in an active war zone was the protrusion of ship's bow in the harbor. However, this has been a common sight in the waters of the British Isles.
These were ships that were sunk. And
Right.
They were just sticking up
Right.
out.
Then the following, or 2 days later, I also have an entry here throughout the entire day, troops disembarked from our ship into LSTs, which took them ashore. Approximately 8 p.m., all troops were evacuated. From indirect reports, we are about 50 miles from Cherbourg, France. We are in a circular harbor, which is dotted with all types of Allied ships. As one gazes out about the harbor, a great spectacle of balloons dot the sky, and ships can be seen in every direction. Along the shore, we saw the remnants of a bombed hamlet. We also detected planes landing near the tip of the cove, indicating an Allied air base was close by. But then, there's one more entry I'd like to share with you, and this is one of the most memorable experiences that I had in my military career. And this is on July 5th, 1944. It says, in making this entry, I first would like to express my feeling of gratefulness in being alive and uninjured. Our ship left the Idaho beachhead the early part of the evening and sailed in a convoy of 6 ships. Directly following our evening meal, I joined the stud poker session, which broke up at 8 o'clock in order that we may attend the movie entitled White Cargo. Now, we were playing cards there for several hours, and when they announced that this movie entitled White Cargo was to be shown, everybody at that card table had seen the movie. Some argued, said, hey, let's take a break, we've been playing for some time, and a few others said, and the others said, well, what the heck, we've all seen the movie, why go and see it? Well, it so happened that those that wanted to take a break went out, so we went up and saw the movie. I obtained a very comfortable chair, and everyone present was enjoying the movie until 9:25, when a terrific explosion threw the group in a chaotic state. Everybody dashed for the exits of the hatch number 3. I was quite fortunate in having a quick access to the exit, which made it possible for me to be one of the first ones out on deck. As I came out on the deck, I couldn't ascertain what had happened, for everybody I saw had a mortified look and were going in all directions. I went up aft, and there was most of the crew had congregated. Within a few minutes, a few injuries were conspicuous, but there wasn't any that were extremely serious. But this time it was assumed that our ship had attracted an acoustic mine. The ship started to list, and DEs and small patrol boats congregated about our ship. Eventually, a large barge arrived, and we were instructed to tow us into Southampton. However, we hadn't gone too far, and we were towed back to the French coast. The concussion of the explosion virtually wrecked the ship. The engines, electrical power systems, hatches, mess rooms, quarters, and so forth were damaged. The mine had exploded at a spot that was least vulnerable than practically any other ship. And going back to the card game, we were playing right next to the engine room, and the vibrations from the engine room had attracted this mine, so when it made contact, it blew a big hole right around the engine room where we're playing cards. So if we hadn't left, I wouldn't be here today. It was later found out that another ship in the same convoy was sunk by a mine the same evening, and that we were the only transport out of 13 who arrived from the explosion of mines during the invasion, and so forth. The only thing I also want to share is just a little article that appeared about Portrait of a Lady. This is the ship that we were on, the Sea Porpoise. And
just hold it still for a minute, Bill, so she can zoom in.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
now this is a ship you were on.
right. And this appeared, I think, according to a friend of mine, said it in the Time magazine. It was also, I guess, he mentioned in Fortune. But anyway, it's a D-Day. The English built SS Sea Porpoise, big, all-welded attack transport, successfully discharges men and supplies in the Battle of Normandy. Then 2, on return voyage, she takes a terrific hit amidships, which, according to her skipper, literally lifted the entire hull 2 or 3 feet. But the sturdy quality of the English all-welded construction proves itself again. She remains afloat. No deaths or serious injury to personal result.
But they didn't even mention your card game.
No, they didn't. So I... Anyway, that was the experience that I've never forgotten, and it was quite moving in terms of.
I'm fascinated by your ledger. Is this your total war experience?
No, it's only one phase. When I was on board ship, I had time to write and make entries, and so it's only one segment of the time that I served on
I
board
wish
ship.
more people had kept written memoirs.
Okay, well then after the Allied invasion, they brought us to Newcastle, England, and then from Newcastle, England, we boarded the USS West Point. Came back to the States for a 2-week survivor's leave, and then I was assigned to the Queen Mary, and that was really an exciting experience. We crossed the Atlantic alone. The sea porpoise that I was on the previous experience traveled in convoy, but the Queen Mary was a huge ship and could travel 33 knots and in a zigzag fashion. And by traveling at that rapid rate and also in a zigzag fashion, it was able to avoid any attack from submarines.
Now, what had they done to the Queen Mary? She was, of course, a luxury liner.
Right.
And they had converted it to...
Yeah, I was just going to mention that to you. Before I do that, I just want to mention that there was one thing that bothered me is the Queen Mary always anchored in the Firth of Clyde. And then we used to take a tender into Gourock and then a train into Glasgow. But I made approximately 7 crossings on the Queen Mary. We always anchored in the same place in the Firth of Clyde. And I've often wondered, well, gosh, the Germans certainly ought to know about this. Why didn't they come over and bomb this ship? Because it's so valuable. On board ship, they not only transported troops, they had 2 shifts. One shift would be inside the ship sleeping, the other would be up above, and then in reverse. Not only that, there'd be entertainers, be diplomats, there would be all kinds of important personnel that they transported. And then coming back to the States, they, of course, would bring back hundreds of wounded. Matter of fact, when I was in Brooklyn, I used to spend with the group I was with, we used to evacuate wounded from the Queen Mary. Now, what was your question?
My question was how much had they done actually to the ship itself?
Right. All right. Now it's coincidentally you asked that question because Ed and I observed our 45th wedding anniversary last year, and we went on a cruise to Hawaii. However, before going out there, we went out to California and Long Beach, where the Queen Mary was, and we observed our 45th anniversary on the Queen Mary. It's now it's a hotel,
restaurant,
and has some, as you say, some nice restaurants, and it's quite an interesting place. But I was just fascinated to see what the ship looked like. And they have tours on it and all that sort of thing. So my experience on the Queen Mary, my assignment was in charge of all the medical dispensaries. That was my particular role. And one thing happened that might be interesting is that every month you were read the Articles of War, no matter where you were. And so while on board ship, we had to hear the Articles of War. So I meandered up on a deck where they assembled to read the Articles of War. And as the articles were being read, all of a sudden I said, well, I've heard that voice before. And it was Russell Baker, Captain Russell Baker from Plainville, Connecticut.
I'll be darned.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Well, as time transpired, one day the commanding officer called me in and said, "Hey, Bill, how come you're requesting to be relieved from duty on board ship? Don't you like it on the Queen Mary?" I said, "I'm not initiating that because the Queen Mary was actually I was a corporal at that time. I had my bed made, went down to the dining room, had a menu. This is during the war." And not only that, I traveled from New York City back and forth, so when you came back, I was able to come home to Plainville and also enjoy all the privileges that New York City offered to servicemen. So that wasn't my idea. But somehow or another, back in Fort Hamilton, they went through with the records, and they discovered I played basketball, and they were organizing a basketball team. So the commanding officer says, well, Bill, he said, you know, do you want to stay here? I said, well, what if I want to go back on the Queen Mary? He said, well, we can't guarantee that. He said, now we need men on the Murmask run. Of course, up the Murmask run, the ships are going down and all that sort of thing. So what happened is I did stay in New York and joined the ball team for a while, and then I thought it wasn't a very patriotic way to win the war. So I processed application and for OCS, Officer Candidate School, and I was accepted, and I went to New Orleans, Louisiana, and I went through Officers Candidate School, and I received my commission in the Transportation Corps. And while I was there, I had some experiences. I don't know about time, but I don't want to go into too great detail.
You can go on for a while.
But saying I was from the from the medics, I didn't have any training in the manual of arms. So first day they issued rifles and, you know, asked us to perform, and I was all, you know, 3-4 hands instead of 2. So they said, well, what are you doing down here? I said, well, I've been accepted for OCS. They said, well, you don't know the manual of arms. You'll go to Plachet. Plachet is then, from there, they used to send you out to Japan. Well, so what I did, I stayed up all night and I practiced the manual of arms in front of a mirror in the men's lavatory, and perfected that deficiency. But there are other things that you go through, and many candidates going through OCS can maybe verify these things. They keep testing you. For instance, one day they said, I was watching a machine gun being dismantled. And here's another area I was very weak in, so I was very alert and paying attention. And the officer came over and said, Candidate Weitzke, why are you asleep? And I was flabbergasted. I looked at everybody. I said, well, I wasn't sleeping. He said, are you calling me a liar? And I said, oh, well, no, sir. Well, anyway, as the day went on, and during OCS, you never walk. You're always on the double. My TAC officer says, hey, Weitzke, he says, what's this here about you getting a class 2 demerit for sleeping in class? I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, I know I was awake, and the other fellows in the group can verify it. He laughed. And I said, well, what do you suggest I do? He said, you can do 2 things. One is contest the demerit or ignore it. He says, you contest it, they might give you another one just to see how you're going to react. So I said, you're suggesting I might just ignore it, so which I did. But these are some of the things that you are testing your...
You're trying to see your reaction.
Right, see what your reaction is and whatnot. And so I got a commission in the Transportation Corps, and my specialty was stevedoring officer, which is the loading and unloading of vessels. And I was sent out to the West Coast to a port company. And this is interesting also. I was assigned to an all-black outfit, all white officers, and the outfit was all black. And I remember the first day that my assignment, I reported to the commanding officer. I was sitting in a chair, and he's telling me all my duties. And he got up from his chair to walk to the file to get some information, and a rock came through the window and landed right in the chair he was sitting in.
Oh my.
So I thought, what am I getting into? And later on in the day, as I was walking down the company area, I could hear them talking. They said, he's all right. He's from Hartford, Connecticut. There ain't any discrimination there. So that saved me. I was a Yankee from Hartford, Connecticut.
But before the war was over, there was some easing of this, wasn't there? Of the all-black outfits.
Yes.
They became integrated.
Right.
Yeah.
And but it was interesting to get acquainted with these men who were from various sections of the country, especially north and south, the difference between the two. You could see education-wise and the social end of it and the cultural end of it, that is a southern black just couldn't assume responsibility very well. If he was given opportunity for promotion, he wouldn't last very long. Whereas the northern black, it was able to do it much more better fashion and could assume responsibility and be more dependable.
You wonder how much of it goes back to the slavery days.
Well, that's
when
it.
they
I
weren't
think a
given
lot
the
of it goes back
responsibility.
where they weren't given an opportunity.
And also they were oppressed. They weren't encouraged to take any responsibility.
Yes. Well, I was with the port company, and then I went back to New Orleans. They sent me back, and I went to an advanced training session for Steve Doring in the Transportation Corps, and then shipped back to California. And meanwhile,
How would you cross the country, Bill? Would that be on a train?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You saw a
Matter
lot of
fact,
trains then, didn't you?
Well, all right, okay. Now it's interesting you brought that up, because when I went back to Camp Anza in California, I was reassigned and I became a train commander.
Oh my!
And the function of that was to take trains out of California with there were troop trains, and take men back to their nearest home base where they eventually would be discharged. So in the latter part of my experience, I was in 40 out of 48 states. I traveled a great deal by
Boy,
train.
you were in everything from ships, boats, trains,
Right,
all
yes.
sorts of transportation.
Yes.
You got around.
Well, I almost didn't. I was home, and on one of these, I took, I think, a group to Fort Dix, and I came home. And I was supposed to be back to L.A. in a certain period of time. So I drove, let's see, I went to, was LaGuardia Airport that time. I was supposed to be back. I missed the plane by 5 minutes. So then I went over to Newark and got a plane back to L.A. So happened that plane I missed crashed in the San Bernardino Mountains, and everyone was killed. And my folks thought I was on that plane, because that was the plane I was supposed to depart on. So when I called them, they were pleasantly surprised.
So that
but
was-
it's just that these things that...
That was twice that you almost were in the wrong place at the
Yes,
wrong minute.
yes.
And just saved really by minutes.
Yes, yes.
So somebody was watching over you.
Well,
I think.
I always relate this too, that when I was discharged on the West Coast, and there were 4 of us that were going to drive back. One of the men had an automobile, and so we thought, well, we didn't want to waste any time. We'd take turns driving. One man would drive, the other would sleep, and that sort of thing. So I guess it was about the second day, and it was my turn to drive. And I was driving, and I looked ahead, and I saw a truck. This was in New Mexico, where there's roads, highways are
Long,
straight.
straight.
I saw a truck, and then all of a sudden I looked again. The truck wasn't there. I looked in the mirror. The truck was way behind me. I had fallen asleep at the wheel and passed that truck.
Oh my word.
So from then on, we said, hey, wait a minute, we want to get home alive. But I think this was happening. A lot of servicemen
Yes.
coming home on leave. They wanted to get home and get that extra time, and wouldn't get enough sleep, and
Some of them never made
and
it.
all kinds of accidents. So I was a train commander at the near the end of the war,
Yeah.
and then finally I was, as I say, discharged on the West Coast, and then coming home I joined a reserve unit, a transportation reserve unit that met in Hartford for a period of time. They finally phased that out, and so then finally I didn't belong to the reserve any longer.
Do you keep track of any of those people that you were in the service with?
Well, there are a few. I remember looking at Bert Norton's tape,
Yes,
and he
yes.
mentioned that I still, and one in particular, a fellow by the name of Charlie Niles. He was the first one that I had basic training, and I've corresponded with him while the rest of my time in the service, and I still correspond with him all
Wow,
these years.
that's great.
Yeah, he lives in New York.
Bill, looking back over 50 years, can you believe it was 50 years since you were that young man in the picture?
Unbelievable.
What stands out in your mind when you think your thoughts drift back to the war years?
Well, from a personal point of view, I think I personally had an opportunity to mature. I remember when I came back and visited, and Mr. Trask, when I walked in the office, the first thing he said, "The boy is gone." and I've often thought of that,
Yeah.
because the experiences you go through and the things that you face, and the people you meet and the places you go and decisions you've got to make and all that,
And a
you're
lot of
kind
you
of
grew
on
up
your
in a
own
hurry.
quite a bit, right?
You grew up in a
So
hurry.
I think that's one of the things, and there's just one other little experience that I'd like to share with you. I think it's unusual in many respects. when I went to basic training, there was a fellow by the name of Tom Foley that came from West Hartford. We were in basic training together. And then as time went on, and I was in New York at the Brooklyn Army Base, and one night in Times Square it was raining, and I was going around the corner, and I bumped into this GI, and it was Tom Foley.
Oh, isn't that remarkable?
And so we reminisced and whatnot. Then as time went on, when I was in OCS in New Orleans, I was in the Blue Room in the Hotel Roosevelt in a cocktail lounge. All of a sudden I heard someone say, "Hey, Whit!" And I looked, my friend Tom Foley.
Oh, my goodness.
Then as time went on, I was in California, and I was at a camp in, I don't know if it was I don't remember the particular camp was Camp Anza or what it was, but I was walking down one of the areas, and all of a sudden from a window came a voice saying, "Hey, Whit!" And I looked at my friend Tom Foley. But then the thing is, when we first got married, we were at Fox's, and we were shopping, and all of a sudden I said to Edna, "My God, there's Tom Foley. He was selling shoes." So Edna says, "Who's Tom Foley?" Well, I went through this.
Went through the whole thing. Yeah.
And I think that's so unusual that to be able to meet the same individual here in Massachusetts, New York City, New Orleans, California, and then back in Hartford, Connecticut. Right. So it's just one of those things
that's a great story.
It's very unusual. Yeah.
I'd like to close your tape by saying that you and Edna were kind enough to both come today, and you're our only husband and wife team, and that was very special for us.
Well,
and thanks a lot, Bill. That was a great tape.
Well, we appreciate
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.
Our next guest on our tape is Tony Badolato, Plainville, longtime Plainville resident, native of New Britain, and known for his interest in the sports at the town of Plainville. And Tony's going to share some of his wartime experiences with us.
You want me to tell you about my experiences? Okay, I'll tell you. I went into the service from New Britain, Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and I was all alone. I had no Plainville, no New Britain, nobody that I knew. And it was a sudden thing for me, so I ended up in Fort Devens. From Fort Devens, I went to basic training in Camp Wheeler, Georgia. And I went through basic training and infantry training in Camp Wheeler, Georgia. There was one man from New Britain, from Connecticut really. All the rest were from Georgia and around the southern states. And I had a tough basic training. We went through basic training pretty good. And the only guy from New Britain, he got out because of flat feet. His feet were flat. He had to cut his shoes off one day, so that took care of him. And after basic training, we went to Camp Stoneman, California, to be shipped overseas. That was from March until probably August, September, and we ended up in Camp Stoneman. From Camp Stoneman, we stood there for a little while. We're ready to embark on our to be assigned to our units at that time, and I didn't know who I was going to be assigned to. And as we were getting ready to leave, I got a telegram. I had two brothers in the service,
And what were their names, Tony?
John and Dom, and unfortunately, John got killed at this time.
Now, he was in the service.
And
He was a service person.
it was very unfortunate because John and I were probably really as close as anybody could get. So I had to come home on emergency furlough. My parents were really upset that they should be. After my emergency furlough, I went back to Camp Stoneman. And at that time, the group that I was supposed to go oversee they had left. Naturally, they're not going to wait for me. I was put on the first boat that was ready to go overseas, and I had another bunch of strange people, which was hard for me because I was just a kid.
How old were you,
Nobody
Tony?
moved out of town.
How old were you, Tony, at that point?
I just turned 19.
So you were a kid, yeah.
I'd call myself a kid. Today, that's a man, but in those days, let's face it,
It was a more innocent age.
It was a different type. We didn't move around as much as you. But I made out okay. I was going overseas. I went over on to New Amsterdam. That has another story, but I won't tell you. But but it's a good story. That's a happy story, but I won't tell you that one because they signed me to be a gunner on a boat because I had experience with the. So while we were going overseas, we ended up in New Zealand. Our first stop was New Zealand. We just didn't even get off the boat. We stopped in Auckland, New Zealand, and then from Auckland, New Zealand, we went to Sydney, Australia, and we debarked there, and we stayed maybe a month or so in Sydney, and from Sydney we went to Milne Bay in New Guinea. And I, at just about that time, I still was not assigned to anybody, and that was about, I say, maybe January of '44. And I finally got it. When we got to Milne Bay, they assigned me to the 543rd Engineer Boat and Shore Regiment, which is a boat and shore regiment that took care of landing, troops, supplies, and anything. I didn't know the first thing about never being on a boat. What did I know about a boat? So anyway, I was a machine gunner on the boat, on a landing barge, and I made out well in there. I met a lot of real nice fellow, real nice guys.
Tony, is that picture of one of your landing barges that you brought with us? Turn it for the camera to see, and just hold it nice and steady. And that looks, in one picture, like the boys are going in for a landing, and then at the bottom it looks like possibly right after a landing.
We were also, in being a boat and shore regiment, it also took care of building airfields too, helping.
So that's probably what the second picture is.
I was not in that particular end of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, being a boat, like I said, it was new to me, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about boats, and I enjoyed being with all the real nice guys. I can't say that I ever met a bad soldier. I've met a lot of friends, and I made a lot of fun.
So, Tony, you were not so much involved in these taking troops in on these landing crafts as taking in material to build landing strips and so forth?
We made, it would depend on what, like if you were in an assault landing, which we had about 7 assault landings to our credit, besides maybe any number of other landings. That's what we call other land when we bring in the supplies. That's not really you're going in for an assault landing. Your assault landings are when you're first making your landings. We were bringing the troops in.
Okay, so you were doing both.
We brought the troops in, yes. We brought, and we were under fire, and we were on. All told, our regiment was credited with over 60 assault landings.
That's
a
lot
of landings. So our outfit ourselves made about seven assault landings. That's within the first 5 waves we were in it. Oh, anyway, we went from Goodenough Island, which is in Milne Bay, all the way up New Guinea coast. It was a different war than Europe, whereas in the Pacific you jumped from island to island. In Europe you were all on one big piece of land. In the Pacific we had to be on the move. We never were stationed more than maybe a month at the most in one place. We were on the move all the time. We always moving our butts from one area to the other. In fact, one of the biggest surprises was being on New Britain Island we made a
New
soft
Britain?
landing on Britain Island. I said, I'm home. It was
But it
nothing
didn't
like
seem that
home.
way, I'll bet.
No. So, after being in New Guinea for a while, we made our first assault landing on Newfoundland Island. And we had about a 200-mile run we had to make to get to the landing. You had to go from one piece of land to another. And never got acquainted with a piece of land because all it was jungle land. And so you made your move and you got out of we got out of there. We made our move and stayed there for a week, 2 weeks, and then we had to make another move, and we kept going all the way up the coast of New Guinea.
Now, Tony, some of these little islands you stopped at, other than the Japanese emplacements, were there any others? Were there any civilian people on some of these
There were
islands?
natives, a lot of natives.
There were?
There was a lot of natives. They were speaking pidgin English.
Mm-hmm.
So you could understand them if you. At that time, I could hear it, so pretty good. So
Did you have much contact with them, or did they try to stay out of the
we
way?
did. They were pretty. Well, like I said, we weren't there too long, but while we were there, they were very good. The natives were really. They did a lot of the work around and look. Sometimes they would hire them or whatever they did to help them clean up or something like that. They were the natives were. We call them fuzzy wuzzies because they had. I think they were in style before our
Afros, the Afro
Afro-Americans,
hairs, yes,
because
that's
they
right.
had the fuzzy hair, but they had all different colors hair. You'd be surprised what color they had. But we didn't have too much time to fraternize because we were always busy. If we weren't on the move, we were unloading ships. If we weren't unloading ships, we were on the move. So it was continuous movement.
Now, you lived in tents when you were on these islands,
on the beach,
basically?
yes. When we were on shore, we lived, mostly we would sleep on our boats.
Mm-hmm.
But when we stayed in more than a couple of weeks, we'd stay in a tent.
And I think you have a photograph there of something that was trying to keep you company in one of your tents.
Iguanas. We used to find these things.
Now, this I think we should point out this reptile is not being injured. You let him loose after this encounter, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, I had some good experiences. One of the best experiences I ever had was I ran into my brother-in-law unexpectedly,
And who was that?
we were going in for some supplies. My brother-in-law, his name was Dom DeAndrea. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago.
But you met him out there in the wilds of the Pacific.
Yes. And I saw him. He was in the 43rd Division. So I happened to be going in for some supplies, and I saw the 43rd Division. I said, I'm taking a chance. I'm going to go see if I know anybody, because I knew a lot of and I saw a guy by the name of Dave Larice. I think he lived in town for a little while, I'm not sure. And I said, Dave, is Dom DeAndrea around? And he says, yeah, he just came back from patrol, he's sleeping. And I said, well, I'm going to go, where is he? He's in the tent over there. I woke him up, and he looked at me, and he was one of the first men to go in, and I was in high school when he went in at 40 down to Camp Landing. So there was a little change between then and when he saw me last. So he says, who are you? Man, he was mad because I woke him up, and I said, I'm your brother-in-law, Tony. And he took a second look.
Then he was glad to see you, I'm sure.
Well, so we had to spend a couple of minutes together, and I had to leave, and we took off. We were going up to make another landing, so we were just getting our supplies and moving out. So from there, as strange as it seems, I met him 3 times.
For goodness sakes.
I met him. He was on a boat when we went from New Guinea to the Philippines, and The reason I know this is from later talking to him, that we were getting hit by a lot of, I think that was probably one of the greatest armadas ever put together for a landing. You could look as far as your eyes could see, and with boats all over.
All kinds of boats and ships.
So, the Japanese were trying to, they had their kamikazes coming in, and they were hitting some boats around us. He just got missed. I find out later that they just missed his, and then was hitting a couple of boats from ours. So I knew he was within that area. So we landed anyway from New Guinea. We were in the same. They landed on a. I can't tell you the name of the beach, but we were in Lingang Gulf, and we made a landing. We made our landings on one beach, and they were on the other beach in the San Fernando, San Fabian area. And at night we landed and we stayed ashore because when we went in, we had to go in through a channel, and we couldn't. Once we got in, and the tide changes, you couldn't get out, so you stayed in. And we stayed in, and you could see. We were fortunate in our area. I think maybe a pig or a cow got killed that night. But on our left flanks, they were really taking a beating. So we were there maybe a couple of weeks, and who to my surprise, he comes down, my brother-in-law, and he says, "I heard you were down here." You never know how words get around in the service. Nobody could ever tell you. I can't tell you how I knew he was somewhere. And I don't think anybody can tell you how they really find out everything.
They had their own grapevine.
They're just there. If you want, the information is there. Somebody has it. Kilroy always has it.
Right.
Kilroy
Right.
has it.
That's
So
right. That was the
anyway, he
era
came
of Kilroy.
down, and we had a little visit, and he had to leave again. So we made a couple of moves. We went up to near Baguio, and of course, all this time I writing home, and home was writing to me, and I found out that he was ready to be discharged from the Philippines, go home. So I can't tell you to this day, but I made it to Manila. And we haven't even secured the in between, and I don't know how we did it, but I had latched onto a guy who was driving a truck down to Manila.
All right. Just take a minute. Take a minute. It's okay.
And I met him.
You met him again. It's amazing.
And we had 3 nights.
Yeah. Had a nice visit. Yeah. That's
We
wonderful.
had a good time.
That's wonderful.
We spent 3 nights together. I don't even know how I got back to my outfit. And when I got back to my outfit, we were ready to leave.
And now you were leaving?
They were packed up and ready to go, and I had real good friends.
Now
They had covered for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we got on a boat.
And now you were headed for where?
We headed for Japan.
Okay, now we want to hear about your Japan experience.
Well, when we got to Japan, we were supposedly supposed to be the first outfit to get there. And Kilroy was there before. He had a sign across we were going into Hokkaido. And we went into Hokkaido. We had landed there, and much to our surprise, people were real nice. They did. I suppose they were in the same boat that we were. They were doing what they were told, and
But there really was a big sign that said Kilroy was here?
There was no. We were just surprised. I was just surprised by their dress, not being not a world traveler. By this time, I guess I should have been used to almost everything, but we were, I guess most of us had been in the islands for so long that we didn't give it much thought of how cold it was going to be there. It was so cold that I think maybe 90% of my outfit was down with some sort of cold or flu or something. And the most I think I can remember about Japan, and it's cold. We took all the newspapers we could get, and we laid them in our cots and try to keep the cold air out of us.
In other words, you didn't have the equipment with you to keep warm.
We weren't equipped for it. We had summer. We were summer. That's
you came in from the tropical islands, right? Tony, you mentioned you were surprised how the people were dressed.
Yes.
They were dressed what, in their native, what we think of as native?
We used to dress, women with dresses on, and they had their native clothes on. They were like, what I used to call them was, maybe you'll get a kick out of that, but when the girls used to go to gym class with the bloomers.
Yeah, and that's the way the ladies were dressed.
They had their long bloomers on,
and this was their traditional
dress.
dress.
The crotch was down to the and it was something strange for me.
You just weren't ready to see that.
And well, they were very hungry. I tell you, we used to give them some of our rations, and the same as everywhere we went. It seemed like everybody was really hungry. We were, as bad as we got fed, we were better fed than most.
At least it was regular food you got.
Food.
Tony, other than the possible shortage of food among the civilians, could you see any other outward signs of the war? Loss, I mean, for instance, a scarcity of young men?
No, fortunately, I don't think America hit this area at all with anything. And I think it was more or less, I think they were more relieved the war is over as well as we were. I think, and I don't think like the atomic bomb dropped, which when they dropped, I don't think it affected them at all because they were not near that area. So if you weren't within that area, you would know the difference. They probably, there was some, evidently there must have been some sort of shelling there. Maybe the bomber, maybe Doolittle, when he went over, he might have dropped something there. I don't know.
Because you did see some damage. Yeah, you did see some damage.
But there was some damage.
Now, you were restricted as to where you could go, I'm sure, being military personnel.
Well, for a time we were restricted until they found out, I think they wanted us to get the field, and the people to get the field, American troops. And once we got the field was there, and there was no, so that nobody's going to be getting shot, and you're not going to be shooting someone else, and somebody's not going to be shooting you. Once that field was that everything was okay, and it was going to end up okay, we were allowed to travel, and we took some real good trips. We went down on train. Talk about trains; they were packed to the. I can remember sitting on a train next to a Somali. Man, he was big.
Like the wrestlers that we see on TV today?
Yes, was he big. I think he took 3 seats. He was monsters. And there were everybody, of course you can't talk because you try talking with your hands, which is
but basically
you could
supposed
speak.
to be very polite people.
That's it. They were very polite to us, and we were nice. I think we, on the whole, I think, well, you get, no matter what, you get sometimes somebody.
Some crazy
but
guy.
We were, they treated us good, we treated them real good, in return. And we ended up in Tokyo, looking around Tokyo, went around in the Ginza. I can remember going down the Ginza. I can remember.
And the Ginza is a major street in Tokyo.
Yes,
right?
That's where everything is happening.
Like Broadway.
And we went around the moat, and being a small town kid, and I knew Britain was small at that time. I didn't. Everything impressed me.
Sure.
Not that that would really stand out in my mind and say, well, I could remember the Emperor's Castle. I saw it, and I saw the Mount Fuji, and it's like a picture. And
Was it doing anything when you looked at it? Was it
nothing.
wasn't erupting?
We had no cameras. We weren't allowed cameras.
Oh, you weren't allowed cameras.
No, the only reason I got a couple of pictures, I had a little Brownie, you know how the
Little tiny ones,
Brownie
yes,
cameras
yes.
I had stacked at it, and they didn't take it away from me, so I had a camera. I took some pictures of it. In fact, I had some pictures that I took of paratroopers being shot, dropped down, but you couldn't tell they were paratroopers because they were little white dots,
Yeah.
little picture, 2 or 3 inches
Well,
across. So.
Tony, looking back at your experience all through the Philippines, changing your type of military service and then going on to Japan, after 50 years, what stays in your mind the most?
And I think I can't believe that no matter where you go, people are the same. People are the same. To give them a chance, they'll be good. People are good. I met so many, like in the Philippines, it would take me billions of hours to tell you how many nice people I met. I wrote to people in Australia, and there's no harm lost. In Philippines, they're lost, and it made real good friends.
So there's good guys wherever you go.
And to be happy that I met, I didn't tell you, I met one of the boy I played basketball in New Britain. I met him on a ship. In fact, he worked at GE. His first name is Ed Bonart. His first name is Ed, and his last name is Bonart. And I met him overseas, and not being with anybody from Connecticut or Plainville or New Britain, and then to run into another man, he was in charge of a freezer barge. Ended up, he gave me a box full of pork chops, and I brought them back, and we had pork chops. I gave it to my cook. Our cook, he cooked them up.
And you were the hero of the day.
I was king for a day. They would have gave me the house.
Well, that's marvelous, Tony.
There's a lot of good experiences, but like I said, war is just not pleasant. So
we thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your experiences. And thanks, Tony. Our next guest on our series of tapes is Elaine Stegmaier, who is one of our few ladies that has participated in Plainville Remembers World War II. And Elaine, tell us your experiences.
Well, I enlisted in 1943, November, from the Los Angeles area, where I was working in aircraft at the time. I took my basic training at Fort Des Moines, Iowa. Then, after completing basic, I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Tell us about the little things you're holding.
Well, these are my dog tags, and of course, as all World War II members know, you were never without them. They did not come off even in showers. Originally, it had a metal necklace, and us women used to tuck them down inside our shirts, and because they were metal, they were very cold. So this particular pair of booties, as we call them, was crocheted by a friend, Margie Welch, who is now gone, and we enjoyed their comfort all through our careers.
Well, it's a different kind of booties, that's for sure.
Then when the war was over, we switched to old plastic necklaces. They were more comfortable. So I wore these from November 1943 through early October. Well, really, because I was a civilian the last 6 months I spent in Europe. We wore them then, so until April 1947.
So now, after your basic training,
I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. There I was trained on-the-job training in the dental clinic. I could clean teeth, take dental x-rays, mix fillings. I just didn't drill them and fill them. From there, in early 1945, I was put on overseas orders. By this time, the war was practically over in Europe. Most of the fighting had been completed. I took my overseas training again at Fort Des Moines, Iowa.
Elaine, I don't think you told us what branch of the service you were in.
I was in the WWII, Women's Army Corps. Then I missed being sent to the Pacific because I wouldn't sign a waiver because I hadn't had leave in a year, which proved nice for me because after my leave I was sent to Europe, which to me is quite a plum place to be sent. And in Europe, we crossed the ocean on the QE, it's a Queen Elizabeth I, and when you passed other ships at sea, it made them look like they were going backwards. She went so fast. And now a board ship, it took about 4.5 days to sail from New York to Greenock, Scotland. On board were a whole bunch of Royal Marines and whatnot. And of course, we had to stand guard, and if you were lucky, you stood guard at night in our little area of the ship. On the night you went ahead 2 hours in time. There was one contingent of American servicemen aboard, a group of engineers. We always played partial to them. You always supported your own troops. When we landed in Greenock, Scotland, we were on troop train, came down through Scotland, England, down to Southampton, and we boarded and the train left just at dusk. I still can see the mist rising from the lazy old rivers, just like a white ribbon winding along. Just absolutely beautiful. And we boarded the USS Exchequer, I should say, at Portsmouth to cross the channel. And we arrived, we boarded in the morning, and we arrived across the French side in the evening. Now, all night long, we had to stay aboard ship because of the sunken shipping at the old Omaha and Utah beaches. And it was dangerous to bring a ship in.
Material sunk from the invasion.
From the D-Day invasion. And of course they were shooting at mines which floated in the English Channel. Very, nice thing is one of those hit the side of the ship. And here's where you learn a little know-how, because you dared, because when we were given our area for quarters, they had stacks and stacks of these canvas bunks. So somebody from the ship came in and says, this section here will do KP in the morning. So that was the section I was in, so I saw an empty bunk over there, and that's where I spent the night.
You were learning.
Oh, learning. Well, in the morning, we disembarked. We went on 40 and 8s.
Now tell us
a train, old wooden benches. The trains were called 40s and 8s because they held 40 people or 8 horses. There are no Johns on board, nothing. And this is where we first really got an inkling of how miserable the war was, because the train would stop so we could eat. And here you would see the French people line up, and you see these little kids with eyes that have seen too much. And we couldn't
and they're hungry.
eat.
Yeah.
They were hungry. We couldn't eat.
Yeah. I bet you fed them. Yeah.
They can have our rations.
Yeah.
Then I was stationed in the woods at Compiègne, which is slightly northeast of Paris. here we lived in 10-man tents, women tents really, but
It was more interesting the other way.
it might have been more interesting the other way until I was put on orders to fly into Berlin, Germany.
Tell us about the showering facilities, Elaine, before you go on.
Oh, here we had showers. You didn't get every day. You could in a helmet or, like that. But like once a week, the truck would come with the hot water, and you were allowed 5 minutes in that shower, and everybody would line up. Of course, you always kept these dear little dog tags on, and and you stood under in that hot shower for your 5
Heaven.
minutes. That was heaven. So.
And of course, you had to have your own soap and so forth.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
soaps and towels or what like that. They just furnished the hot,
The hot
water,
water.
which was a treat. Then it was while I was stationed at Compiègne that I won a lottery because one truck was going into Paris, and they had room to take so many people, and we drew lots, and I was one of the lot, so I got to see Paris.
From the back of a truck.
Yeah. And here's where I found out was told that my brother had left the continent. Who he had fought all the way up from North Africa.
And you had made
to
an
Italy.
effort to find him.
Yeah, well, I knew generally from his letters where he was, and yet he never had anything inked out on his V-mail. I still have all of his V-mail. Then, when we were put on orders to go to Berlin, we went to this little airstrip and flew. I don't think they even had parachutes on those planes, now you come to think of it. Piled our duffel bags in the middle and we rode side saddle. We landed at Potsdam. They had to move the president's plane for us. This is July 1945. So all the GIs there, now that was Truman, Churchill, and Stalin.
And this
That's
is the big Potsdam
big
conference was
three
going
in
on.
July of 1945. And up until that time, the Russians had held the city of Berlin. And they fed us real good, and they must have thought we were bigwigs because they had to move the president's plane so ours could come in and land. Here we convoyed from Potsdam. Maybe it's 25, 30 miles away. And here where you, just to see nothing but rubble, like the rubble from buildings like 2 stories high that filled the streets, and the truck would just wend its way. And once we got into the town of Berlin, of course it's all same kind of rubble, but we lived in Charlottenburg, one section. It seemed strange. They took over some apartment buildings for housing for us. No guards, no nothing. And the men lived inside the compound at old Telefunken Radio, and I guess it's still a radio or TV station today, something there, but they lived inside the fencing and us girls didn't.
Now, at that point, when you were there, Elaine, what were your duties?
We didn't do much in northern France. There wasn't much left because everything had moved to
That moved
Germany.
on, right?
And once in Berlin, we set up a dispensary. This was the head of the field hospital for emergency dental care, and of course there was a lot of social diseases going around that the poor fellows had, and trench mouth and stuff with that, keeping track of those. And I worked there. We moved the Germans out of the housing on the Unterden Linden, and we saved the schnapps for. We figured we're going to wait till the war is all over, then we were going to celebrate.
Oh, I thought
which
you
we
were
did.
keeping them for medicinal reasons.
Never thought of that. Then I worked in the dispensary in the dental area, and here I would listen to the GIs because Berlin was just loaded with GIs by this time, and some of them because they had to wait for a certain number of points and then they'd get to go home.
Right.
In that, whatever order. So you'd listen to tales of the first letdown that the fighting was over.
Right.
And then you look at them and you wonder how they survived at all. Then my friend Jane, I met her on the ship going over. We had so much leave accumulated, we spent a whole month in the UK. Jane worked at CIC, that's counterintelligence, down at Berlin headquarters. And so they said, well, you're going to the UK. They gave us a name of a Jewish professor. So we decided we were going to Dublin. Now, you know Ireland was not in the war, but she was very pro-German because it was against the British. We managed to get to Dublin. We met this professor because they were in the hopes of uniting families again, of what happened to whom. He'd managed to get out, I guess, at the very beginning before the Germans had invaded the Netherlands and had taken France. But he didn't know of anybody else that had gotten out. But we did get to see the Book of Kell that's in Trinity College, which is something. But we never could help, unite anybody. And then when I came back, the field hospital had moved in, so I was out of a job. Real Army intelligence. They made me the company first sergeant, which I stayed in as company first sergeant until I decided to get out, and I took a job with the Army Exchange Service for 6 months.
That was as a civilian.
Yes, my discharge reads discharged in Berlin, Germany.
I see.
And one of the things that seemed strange when I came home in April of 1947 was our government was always talking pro-Russia. Well, I'd lived in the same city with the Russians and the French and the English for almost 2 complete years. But while I was first sergeant in very early of 1946, we were very close to war with the Russians. And we were warned right down to the company first sergeant what our job would be. And I always figured they'd stand the CO up and shoot hurt, and I'd be next in line.
Elaine, looking back over 50 years, it's good to hear somebody you can laugh about. Over 50 years now, looking back on your war experience, your military experience, is there something that your mind hones in on, something that stands out?
Always, you see the faces of people. When I first went into Berlin, there was this funny smell, and I almost smelled it once like that, and it was a shock, when we used to get from the, the metal place down there.
The foundry.
Foundry. And because when we first went into Berlin, there were the bodies rotting in the subways, and I never, ever want to smell that again, but it was just so...
That's the smell of war.
It is. And if people could see it, and the buildings all down, and some of the people, now the first winter we were over there, the winter of 45, 46, was a mild winter. The winter prior to that, with the Battle of the Bulge and all those, had been a terrible winter. And the winter following was very bad again. I wanted to go to Holland, because I'm of half Dutch ancestry. My father was born and raised, and he died in Holland. I would have met my Dutch grandfather. My Dutch grandmother died in 1942. But the Dutch, of course, had suffered an extra 6 months from the time Montgomery took Antwerp till things. And if an American went to Holland, they would feed the American and starve themselves. And I only had the name of the town where my father was born to go on at that time. Since then, of course, I've...
So you feel that the civilian experience moved
always,
you very much?
Oh yes. And you always wonder why they need you so bad, thinking of the military men, or the men who do the fighting. They need them so bad. They can't do without them. And yet, when they're dead, they can get along well without them. Such a waste.
Such is war.
That is war.
Thank you, Elaine, for sharing your feminine viewpoint of World War II. That's very nice of you to come and be with us. Thank you.